Okay, so you constantly put other people's needs ahead of your own, but you tell yourself, this is just me being helpful or being a good person or partner or friend. And maybe you're even really good at doing everything. In fact, you may even find you don't trust other people to be able to do things as well as you can. And so when somebody's struggling, you're instantly like, I've got it. I'll handle this for you. But maybe eventually you feel drained. And yet, you can't seem to stop helping people all the time, even when it's burning you out. You're seen as the reliable one, the person that everybody depends on. And on the outside, it looks like you've got everything together. But on the inside, maybe you're actually feeling pressured, overwhelmed, and neglected. Well, if you don't understand how these patterns affect your relationships, you will continue to feel unappreciated, burnt out, and actually find it really difficult to maintain healthy boundaries. And the difference here between somebody who's just showing up versus somebody who's what's known as a high-functioning codependent may actually shock you and may in fact inform you about so many of your relationship patterns and why you feel the way that you do. So much so that by changing just one or two things that we're going to cover in this video, it can transform the future of your relationships forever. So today we're going to talk about the topic of high functioning codependency, and we're going to talk about how to make sure that not only are you aware of these patterns and 8 major symptoms that will help you to see if you are in fact a high functioning codependent, but will allow you to change some of these patterns and feel more loved, more seen, and more connected in all of your relationships as a result, and also stop feeling that heavy cloud of exhaustion looming over you. So let's talk about this topic. I actually got inspired to create a video about this because I recently recorded a podcast episode that you will see at some point soon with Terri Coles. And she recently wrote a book called The High Functioning Codependent. And what I realized that was so interesting is just how much of this was interwoven in the work that I teach, in particular to fearful avoidant attachment styles and anxious attachment styles, where we talk about codependency not just being this traditional thing that you may have originally heard in the term of codependency from people like Melody Beattie, where you have to be supporting an addict and that's what makes you a codependent, but in fact, how codependency reigns so strongly across patterns of both fearful avoidant and anxious attachment style individuals. So I got inspired to create this video, and I'll actually put a link to some of Terri Coles' work in the comments down below as well if you're interested in learning more about her book. But I want to start by just going into sharing a story, and I want to see if you hear yourself in this story. And then we're going to go into 8 major symptoms of high functioning codependency, and you can actually check them off and see what you score out of 8. So I had this client years ago, and as soon as I think of this idea of high functioning codependency, it makes me think of this client of mine. So this client of mine, who I'm not going to share her real name, we'll call her Jamie, she owned a spa. And she had 2 young children at the same time. Now, she had a husband, and he was pretty there for her a lot of the time. But when we really talked about her relationship, it was almost like she was always doing everything to help her husband out. She was helping him with his projects at work. She was helping him with the chores around the house and doing everything there. And then she was a mother. So you can only imagine the degree of responsibility with 2 young kids, both under the age of 5 years old, while running a business. And she came into my office because she was burnt out. She was like, I am exhausted. I don't know why. I usually have it all together. In fact, people still think that I have it all together and that I'm just handling it. But I feel this constant loom of anxiety. I experience feelings of doom and just consistent pressure all the time. And now it's actually affecting my ability to sleep. And I don't know why. Is it just because of all of the things I have going on in my life? And of course, at face value, we looked at her life. And yeah, you have a business and 2 young kids and a husband. But when I also inquired a little bit more about who she had around her, I noticed that she had a supportive mother who was trying to show up and be there for the kids as well, a supportive father who was there. And in fact, her husband, both of his parents, were very much in the picture. And I started to wonder, it seems like she has all of these supportive resources, but is she actually using them? So when we started digging into more of her patterns, what I found was this. She would go to work, and when she went into work, she had 2 employees that she worked with closely, but never really leaned on. In fact, she found herself constantly going to these two employees and saying, "Hey, you're a little bit behind on something. I'll just do it for you. I'll take that over." So even though she was paying people in her business to do work for her, instead, she just ended up taking on even more work because she was doing the work for them. Then, when we dug further into her home life, not only was she the primary caregiver to her two children, but she struggled to ask her husband for help. She didn't want to take her kids and put them in daycare very often. And as a result of that, she found herself being the one doing all the chores around the house. She was the breadwinner in the family, so she was paying more of the bills. And of course, when you have two young children under the age of 5, there's a tremendous amount of emotional, physical, and just general responsibility that exists. So I said, why don't you lean on your parents sometimes or your father-in-law or mother-in-law? And she said, well, I just don't really like to be a burden to anybody. And so she was taking and shouldering the burden of every single aspect of her life, in her career life, financially, even emotionally. She was constantly trying to be there for friends and for family members. And as we went further down the line, we found that this was just this overarching pattern. So while she already had so much on her plate to begin with, it was actually exacerbated and magnified by the fact that her relationship to each of these things was highly dysfunctional because she was constantly giving more than she was receiving. She was really afraid to ask for help. And she kept having this theme of, I don't trust other people to do it as well as I do it, so I'm just going to do it myself. Now, I'm curious how many of you see elements of these themes in your own personal patterns. And let's talk more specifically now about the 8 major symptoms of being a high functioning codependent. And the 8th one that we're going to cover is actually something that can create complete chaos in all of your life if you're not paying attention. So make sure that you hear these out. And if you want to get a pen and paper or just mentally follow along with this checklist, let's see what you score out of 8. Number 1, you struggle with boundaries. And I want to say something that's a really important caveat. This is actually something I learned along my own personal healing journey. If you set boundaries from a place of frustration or anger, you're really not good at setting boundaries. Healthy boundary setting means that you set them in real time before there's ever an issue. You say, oh no, I'm not able to do that, sorry. Or, hey, can you help me out with this here? I don't have enough time. And you're able to just talk about it like it's nothing. And I remember at one point in my own journey when I was a fearful avoidant attachment style, thinking, oh, I'm good with boundaries because if when I get really upset and frustrated, I'll tell people how it is. But that's dysfunctional. That didn't make me a good boundary setter. That meant that I let my boundaries be violated so many times over that eventually I would hit this tipping point or critical threshold where all of a sudden I would set boundaries with all this intense emotion. And oftentimes people would just be defensive at that point. They wouldn't even hear what my boundary was. So symptom number 1, you struggle with boundaries. Symptom number 2, you feel so much for others and are so empathetic for other people that it is at the expense of yourself. Okay. So if you are so busy worrying about everybody else in your life, but you're never able to actually tune into your own feelings and emotions, or at least you hardly ever do, then that means that you're weaponizing your own empathy against yourself. True and healthy empathy means that you are able to empathize with yourself as much as you are able to empathize with others. But that's a topic for another time. Symptom number 3, you feel like you've always got it. And you may find that you struggle to trust other people to do it as well as you do, just like Jamie, who I shared about in the story. In fact, you may find work projects at work, you are constantly taking over for other people and doing it for them. Or you may find in your personal life and relationships, even chores, hobbies, things like that, you're always doing for others because you feel like it's quicker, it's easier, and it's more predictable. But you may be enabling people not to learn the powerful lessons they need to learn to get better at tasks or to gain key insights in their own growth and emotional experiences. So sometimes we think that we're being super helpful, but there can often be a hidden downside to this. Number 4, you find yourself in a situation where you are scared to ask for help. Now, this was something, again, on my own journey that I really dug into at a point years ago and found that I was scared to ask other people for help because I didn't trust people would show up. And so I was like, I don't want to ask people and rely on them. And then when they don't show up, I'm going to feel like, oh my gosh, now I'm scrambling at the last minute. And I'm curious what your underlying reason is. For some people, it's that they feel like they'll be a burden if they ask for help and they don't want to be abandoned. But for whatever reason, you may find yourself feeling very uncomfortable asking for help. Our next one here is that you may find in your life and relationships when you look very closely, you often feel unseen, unloved, or alone. Or maybe even you feel a combination of all three of those things. You see, the more we go through life and we only show ourselves with conditions because we're always on our best behavior, we're always showing up at 110%, we're never showing our fears or flaws to anybody else. We always have to have it all together. The more you are showing yourself with constant conditions and pressure, the more you're only making room to feel conditionally loved. True connected relationships where we have deeper love, there's reciprocity. We are able to receive and give, not just one or the other. In fact, if you find yourself constantly having one-way relationships because you are overgiving and you're blocking receiving or scared to receive, then this can be a lonely road for you. Have you ever taken the time to just evaluate what that feels like? You may find yourself feeling like you're really alone under pressure or in challenging situations. And sure, that could be true circumstantially, but if it's a pattern and theme for you over and over again in all of your relationships and through season after season of life, then maybe there's something you're doing that's underneath that that's worth taking a look at. Our next one here, number 6, is feeling resentful. Your resentment is a wonderful barometer for how much you're in one-way relationships. You see, resentment is often the result of unmet needs plus a lack of communication. In other words, you usually feel like there's something that you're really needing, perhaps reciprocity, perhaps support around your house or support in the workplace. And that need is not being met because you are not communicating. And as much as we would love for people in the world to be mind readers, it just doesn't work like that. You are constantly teaching people how to treat you. If you're the person who always has it together, you're the person who's always showing up at 110%, then what you're going to find as a result of that are people are like, hey, he's always got it. She's always got it. They've always got it. They don't need anything. They're fine because that's how you are showing yourself to the world. So of course people come to believe and think that. But deep down, when you start feeling resentment, that is a powerful checkpoint. That is powerful emotional feedback for you to go inwards and take a look at what may be going on beneath the surface. Number 7, here's a dead giveaway. If you are feeling like in your life you are completely overwhelmed, under constant stress, and never having enough time for everything on your plate. Now, I want to share with you a personal story here before we get to number 8, the kind of surprising and really important one. I recently went through a time with my dog. And maybe this sounds like a funny or sort of silly, not funny, but maybe a silly example to some people. But my little dog who I've had for a long time, who I love dearly, and who sleeps in the bed with my husband and I every night and who feels like such a part of our family, was diagnosed with brain cancer. And so we did some things to get him some sort of treatment. He actually did pretty well for the last year and a half. And then recently he started having some seizures, which he had had in the past, but then went away when we did some treatment. And at this point, I was like, okay, we're going to have to see if we can even treat him again. What's going on? And I did something that 10, 15 years ago, when I had a lot of these patterns myself, I would have never thought of. I looked at my life and I looked at my schedule. And I said, I have a lot of responsibilities, but this is really important to me. Here's what I'm not going to try to do. I am not going to try to keep up with all these responsibilities when there's this urgent situation going on that I need to get to the bottom of. So in advance, I looked at my 2 weeks and I rescheduled a bunch of stuff. I canceled things. I changed things because I knew that me just trying to run a million miles an hour and not take myself into consideration or put myself on the bottom of the totem pole because there's these urgent situations plus my commitments actually isn't sustainable. Those are the types of things that lead to burnout or frustration, or you not even being able to show up for anything the way that you want. So what I did is I took an honest look at my schedule and I took like 25, 30% of things off and rescheduled them for the future so that I could still show up and be a person for myself and actually show up as the best version of myself to handle this situation in the meantime. And I share this as a hopeful analogy for anybody who, when you go through a difficult time or some external challenges in life or big inconveniences or changes, that you don't just keep piling on because that is something that high functioning codependents do. It's not sustainable. And that's what brings me to symptom number 8, that you may struggle with chronic burnout. You may be perpetually in burnout, perhaps, and not even know it. Now, burnout is a deeper conversation, and I want to talk to you about how we can actually manage creating change in high functioning codependency. But I do want to let you know before we talk about 3 things you can start today will change the cycle for you. If you actually want to check out either of these 2 courses fully for free, I actually have a burnout course that helps you understand the stages of burnout, because sometimes you're actually operating in burnout and you're just really good at skating by, but there's some symptoms of being in chronic burnout, like loss of passion, loss of energy, loss of sustained interest, and even diminished attention and focus, and many other symptoms that may surprise you. But if you want to check out a course fully for free on that for a limited time, I'll put the link to that down below. Or if you want to do a deeper dive into codependency overall, I'll put a link for free again for a codependency course that you can check out again fully for free for 7 days. And it talks about how to recondition these patterns in your life. Now, at a high level, 3 things you can start doing today are: number 1, practice understanding your boundaries. In fact, I often get people to sit down and do a boundary audit. Take a look at, like, where do I feel overwhelmed in my life and where do I need boundaries in those areas? For example, if you are like, I feel really overwhelmed in my career. Well, let's take a look. Where do you need boundaries in your career? Maybe you stay late after work for your boss and it's not even paid and you're there every day after work for 2 or 3 hours. That's a call for boundaries. Or maybe in your friendships or romantic relationships or familial relationships. Take a look. Let's do an audit and see where you can start setting boundaries slowly but surely over time. It will really give you a lot of energy back. Number 2, overcoming these patterns means the art of taking yourself into consideration. It's something we talk about all the time on this channel, and it is so important because if you don't know how to actually check in before you say yes or no to things, then of course you're going to constantly violate your own boundaries, and that's exhausting. So if you can actually practice this form of when people ask you for something, hey, can you come over and help me all weekend? I'm moving. Hey, consider yourself first. Can you actually help that person all weekend? Do you have the energy to do that? Or what can you do instead? Often I'll ask myself that question when I see something's a no for me. If somebody asks me to do something and I know that that's a no for me, I'll ask myself, I'll check in, I'll say, well, what can I do instead? Is there anything? And maybe it's, hey, I can't help that person move all weekend, but you know what? I'm going to come bring them coffee and breakfast one of the mornings and stop by for some moral support for an hour and help with a couple things. Things don't have to be this like binary, like all or nothing, only yes or only no. When you learn to take yourself into consideration, is it a yes or no for me? If it's a no, is there anything I can do for support, for contribution, something that feels good for me in the process? And doing that also forces you to get into a space where you're considering your own feelings and needs. And number 3, learn to recondition your fears of setting boundaries in the first place. There are reasons you don't set boundaries, and they're individual. For some people, it's like, if I set a boundary, I'll be disliked. For other people, it's I'll be unloved or I'll be rejected or abandoned. For other people, it's, oh, people are going to think I'm a bad person if I set boundaries. None of those are usually true. Okay. And if somebody thinks you're a bad person for having a healthy boundary, that's honestly their problem, not yours. None of those are true. Those are experiences that you've had in the past. Doesn't make them an objective truth. Your mind feels like those are objective truths, but just because you went through that in the past in forms of maybe big T or small t trauma doesn't mean that A, that's how life is supposed to be, or that's what healthy relating is supposed to be. And B, it doesn't mean that that's even how other people are and that that's how it's going to continue to be. So question those ideas, those stories. Can you really know that those are things that are true? Or are you just projecting your past onto your present? And as you do that work and really question those things and practice slowly setting boundaries and taking yourself into consideration, you can see that needle move. And in case you missed it, you can now reserve your spot and get more than a 50% early bird discount for our live relationship coach certification program. Launching October 28th, 2024, this 12-week program gives you the opportunity to build a new career, create your own thriving coaching practice, help your community, and secure your financial future full of abundance with a growing waitlist of clients. And the best part is that you get to spend a whole bunch of time with me as I teach you exclusive subconscious reprogramming tools and help you learn how to change somebody's attachment style from insecurely attached to securely attached so that you can truly help create transformation in people's lives and have a wait list of people waiting to work with you. We also have an entire business week about how to build funnels, systems, and to really build a thriving and busy practice. You can sign up using the link down below the video, and I can't wait to see you there. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to this channel. I put daily videos here all about your patterns in relationships, your patterns in the relationship to yourself, and how we can deeply change and heal and create better lives and better relationships as a result. And if you do want to check out either of those two courses on burnout or reconditioning your codependent patterns fully for free for a limited time, I'll put those down below in a 7-day free trial, a membership to our personal development school that, again, you can check out fully for free. Thank you for watching and for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.